Okay, 18.34. Yaya tu dharma kamarthan dhyaadharayate arjuna prasangena phalang kankshi pratiksa partha rajasi. Yes, last class we discussed about determination in the mode of goodness. Now, that determination by which one holds fast to fruitive results in religion, economic development, sense gratification is of the nature of passion. So, whatever determination that is required to accomplish material things is in the mode of passion. Whatever is required to achieve spiritual things is in the mode of goodness. Purport. Any person who is always desires of fruitive results in religious and economic activities, whose only desire is sense gratification, and whose mind, life, and senses are thus engaged, he is in mode of passion, so he will require that kind of determination. Aya swapnam bhayam shokam vishadam madameva cha na vimunchati durmedha dhritissa partha tamasi. That determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion. Unintelligent determination is in the mode of darkness. Does not go beyond dreaming. Just keep thinking in our dreams that I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. It should not be concluded that a person in the mode of goodness does not dream. So beyond dreaming means Prabhupada saying not that mode of goodness person does not dream. Here dream means too much sleep. Dreaming is always present, either in mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. Dreaming is a natural occurrence. But those who cannot avoid oversleeping, who cannot avoid the pride of enjoying material objects, who are always dreaming of lording it over material world, and whose life, mind, and senses are thus engaged, are considered to determination in the mode of ignorance. So this is unintelligent determination. It doesn't achieve anything. Okay. Sukham tva idanim trividham shruno me varatarshava abhyasadramate yatra dukhantam cha nigacchati. Now, talking about happiness. Please hear from me about three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. Okay. So that happiness by which one can come to the end of all distress, that is what we should be looking for. Purport. A conditioned soul tries to enjoy material happiness again and again. Thus it chews the chewed. Sometimes in the course of such enjoyment, he becomes relieved from material entanglement by association with a great soul. In other words, a conditioned soul is always engaged in some type of sense gratification. But when he understands by good association that is only a repetition of the same thing, he is awakened to his real Krishna consciousness. And he is sometimes relieved from such repetitive so-called happiness. So that is the happiness in the mode of goodness. Yattadagre vishamiva pariname mrutopamam tatsukam satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. So this happiness takes the person to the end, because he comes to self-realization. And what is this? It is like poison in the beginning, very difficult, getting up at 4 o'clock, 4:30, not eating food outside, reducing TV, this, that, and all that. All this is like poison in the beginning, but it is like nectar. It will be like nectar at the end. So this is the happiness that we derive in mode of goodness. And bhakti, pure goodness, we will experience this. In pursuit of self-realization, one has to follow many rules and regulations to control mind and concentrate the mind on the self. All these procedures are very difficult, bitter like poison. But if one is successful in following the regulations and comes to the transcendental position, he begins to drink real nectar. He enjoys life. So what is the use of these rules and regulations? To bring us to the transcendental position. People think that, okay, I'm doing bhakti, so I'm already in the transcendental position. Yes and no. Yes, we are doing it purely, then we are in the transcendental position. But when we are not doing bhakti, which is where we spend most of our times, what happens? Then we will fall down to the modes, we'll get stuck in the modes. But when we follow these rules and regulations, then even when we are not doing bhakti, it will help us to at least not fall down. We might at least remain in the mode of goodness. And By following these rules and regulations, it will also help us to come to the transcendental position and remain there throughout the day, not just during the time when we are doing some spiritual practice. So these rules and regulations are absolutely important. If we don't follow them, then we don't make clear progress, substantial progress. It will seem like we are doing bhakti and we might become complacent. And then we don't know really whether we are going to reach our goal or not. And so Tivra Bhakti is important. Along with Tivra Bhakti, following rules and regulations is very, very important. So that following rules and regulations is like poison in the beginning, but it has to be done. विषयेन्द्रिय संयोगाद्यत्तग्रे मृतोपमं परिणामे विचमिव तत्सुखं राजसंस्मृतम्. That happiness which is derived from the contact of the senses. So the happiness in the mode of goodness is not from the contact of senses. That happiness which is derived from contact of senses with their objects, and which appears like nectar at first but poison at the end, which is the whole of material enjoyment, sense enjoyment. A young man and a young woman meet, and the senses drive the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing, but at the end, after some time, it becomes just like poison. They're separated, or there is divorce, there is lamentation, sorrow, etc. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. Okay, just give me a moment. Second. Okay, so happiness derived from a combination of senses and set objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. Cause of distress. Okay. Yadagre chanubandhe cha sukham mohanam nitralasya pramadottham tattamasam udarhatam. That happiness which is blind to self-realization, is delusion from the beginning to end. Moha, delusion. And which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. So this is very important. Blind to self-realization, delusion from the beginning, arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion. So laziness, sleep, we understand. There's no idea of how to act and how not to act is in the mode of ignorance, the illusion. So here, Prabhupada is saying there's no happiness either in the beginning or at the end. For the person in the mode of passion, there might be some kind of ephemeral happiness in the beginning and at the end, and at the end distress. But for the person in the mode of ignorance, there's only distress. So because he's actually from sleep, laziness, illusion, blind to self-realization, delusion from beginning. So there's really no hope of or no chance for any happiness here. And so it's distress from beginning to end. So we should see, actually, when we're reading this, we should see maybe some aspects of our behavior is in the mode of goodness, some aspect might be in the mode of passion, some might be in ignorance. We have to bring everything to at least mode of goodness, if not transcend immediately. Nadadasti prithivyam va diviteveshu va punaha sattvam prakritijair muktam yadedibih syatribhir gunaihi. There's no being existing either here or among the demigods in the higher planetary systems which is freed from these modes. So this is all, the whole universe, material universe, is under the control influence of these modes. Brahmana kshatriya visham shudranam cha parantapa karmani pravibhaktani swabhava prabhavair gunai. Brahmana, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the modes. Samo damastapa shaucham kshantirrajavameva cha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma swabhavajam. What are the qualities of Brahmana? Shama, peacefulness. Dama, self-control. Tapa, austerity. Shaucham, purity, cleanliness. Shantir, tolerance. Arjavam, honesty. Arjavam, honest. Then Gnanam, Vijnanam, Astikyam. Gnanam is knowledge, Vijnanam, wisdom or applied knowledge. Astikyam is religiousness. So this is a very important word. Shama, Dama, Tapa, Shaucham, Shantir, Arjavam, Gnanam, Vijnanam, Astikyam. Okay. Kauryam tejo dhritir yuddhe chapya palayanam danam ishvara bhavascha kshatram karma swabhavajam. So Shauriyam, heroism, Teja, power, Dhriti, determination, Daksham, resourcefulness. Yuddhe, api apalayanam, not fleeing from battle. That means courage in battle. Generosity, Dhanam, Ishvara Bhava, leadership. So these are 7 qualities of Kshatriya. Rishi Goraksha Vanidyam, Vaishyakarma Swabhavajam, Paricharyatmakam Karma, Sudrasyapi Swabhavajam. Krishi Goraksha Vanidya. Krishi farming, Goraksha co-production, Vanidya is business. Vaishya. Sudras is, there are labor and service. Karma. Yeah. Vicharya. Service. Sve sve karmanya bhirataha. Samsiddhim labate naraha. Swakarma niratta siddhim. Yatha vindati tachunu. By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done. So the important part here is qualities of work by following his qualities of work. Which means that if I know that I'm a Brahmana and I follow my quality of work, then I achieve perfection. I should know my Varna. I should know the qualities of my Varna and I should live accordingly. Yata pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam swakarmana tam abhyartya siddhimindati manavaha. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. The important part is by worship of the Lord. That means by performing work, we should worship Lord. Not performing work for sense gratification, for enjoyment. By performing work, we should worship Lord, then we will achieve perfection. As stated in the 15th chapter, all living beings are fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. As the Supreme Lord is the beginning of all living entities. This is confirmed in Vedanta Sutra. Supreme Lord is therefore the beginning of life of every living entity. Supreme Lord by his 2 energies, external and internal, is all pervading. Therefore, one should worship the Supreme Lord with his energies. Generally, the Vaishnava devotees worship the Supreme Lord with his internal energy. His external energy is a perverted reflection of the internal energy. The external energy is a background. The Supreme Lord, by the expansion of his plenary portions, Paramatma, is situated everywhere. He is the super soul of all demigods, human beings, animals, everywhere. One should therefore know that as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, one has his duty to render service unto the Supreme. Everyone should be engaged in devotional service to the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. This is recommended. Everyone should think that he is engaged in a particular type of occupation by Rishikesha, master of senses. Now, here there are 2 considerations. One is, in a Varnashrama system, then it is as per Varna. Rishikesha is engaging. But now if there is no Varnashrama, then also one should think that he is being engaged by Rishikesha, master of senses, which means what? Result of the work should be used for Krishna. And by the result of the work in which one is engaged, Supreme Personality of Godhead should be worshipped. So we can't simply think that I am engaged in a particular occupation by Rishikesha, but I won't give the earnings to him. We should give the earnings also to him. If one thinks always in this way, then by the grace of Lord, he becomes fully aware of everything. Then this is Karma Yoga. Then we achieve perfection. That is the perfection of life. Lord says, Tesham aham samudharta. Such a person, I will take charge of delivering such a devotee. That is the highest perfection. Whatever occupation one may be engaged, if he serves the Supreme Lord, he will achieve perfection. So that is why Sthane Sthita Prativatam Panuvan Manobi. So we don't have to change our Vritti Dharma. Of course, Stri has to follow Stri Dharma. Purusha, some Dharma for some Vritti Dharma. Because we can't change everything holistically, but ultimately everything should be engaged in the service of Krishna, otherwise bondage. Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhava Niyatam Karma Kurvannapnoti Kilbisham. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation, perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. This is very important. That is why this Varnashrama was so important. Because if the duties prescribed according to our nature is not affected by sinful reaction. But if you do someone else's duty, then it will result in sinful reactions. Because we are not actually, our nature is not to do that work. So this is very important that so that is why, every person today, literally in Kali Yuga, are ending up mostly in doing somebody else's occupation, which means that doing work which is not belonging to their Varna. So inevitably there are sinful reactions. So the only hope is when we use the result in Krishna service. Otherwise, the whole earning is contaminated. One's occupational duties prescribed in Bhagavad Gita, as already discussed. Duties of Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra are described. One should not imitate another's duty. Man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Shudra should not artificially claim to be a Brahmana, although he may have been born into a Brahmana family. So it's not by birth, it's by guna. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable performed in the service of the Lord. This is important. If performed in the service of the Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahmana is certainly in the mode of goodness. But if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmana. For a Kshatriya, there are so many abominable things. Kshatriya has to be violent, he has to tell lies, etc. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty. So if he doesn't do it, then it's karma, papa. And if somebody who is not a Kshatriya tries to do the work of a Kshatriya and tells lie and kills, then that is also papa for him, because it's not his varna. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya, he was hesitating to fight. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, there need not be fear of degradation. The business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make profit. If he does not do so, then he can't make any profit. Sometimes merchant says, oh my dear customer, for you I'm making no profit. But one should know that without profit, merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie if a merchant says that he is not making profit. But the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation which telling lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a Brahmana. Because he is a Vaishya, he is given the right to lie in business. When one is a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, doesn't matter. If he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Brahmanas who perform different types of sacrifice sometimes must kill animals because sometimes animals are sacrificed. Similarly, if Kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. The third chapter of these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for the purpose of yajna or for Vishnu. Yajnarthat karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. Anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. Conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired. You decide to work only to serve the supreme cause. There's mode of nature, but in Kali Yuga we get jobs which are totally many times not according to our nature. And that results in job dissatisfaction. Then another thing, Kalau Shudra Sambhava, everybody is a Shudra. So many contaminations of this Kali Yuga. So it makes it very difficult. So the last part is what we should do. Work only to serve the supreme cause of the Lord, then we are protected. Sahajam karma kaunteya sadosham api na tyajet sarvarambha hi doshena dhumena agni divavrita. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, even if such work is full of fault. Like, Kshatriya has to kill, Vaishya has to tell lie, but we should not give up. All work is contaminated by modes. Even if one is Brahmana, has to perform sacrifice in which animal killing, Kshatriya has to fight enemies, merchant hide his profit to stay in business, may sometimes have to do business on black market. These things are necessary, one cannot avoid them. Similarly, even though man is a Shudra and serving a bad master, he has to carry out the order of the master, even though it should not be done. Despite these flaws, one should continue to carry out prescribed duties, for they are born out of his own nature. Nature is important. Although fire is pure, still there is smoke. Yet smoke does not make the fire impure. Even though there is smoke in the fire, fire is still considered to be the purest of elements. If one prefers to give up the work of a Kshatriya, take the work of a Brahmana, he is not assured that in the occupation of Brahmana there are no unpleasant duties. One may then conclude that in the material world, no one can be completely free from the contamination of material nature. When in winter time one takes a stone from fire, sometimes, okay. Similarly, one should not give up his natural occupation because there are some disturbing elements. Rather, one should be determined to serve the Supreme Lord by his occupational duty. That is the perfection point. When a particular type of occupation is performed for satisfaction of the Lord, all defects in that particular occupation are purified. The results of work are purified. When connected with devotional service, one becomes perfect in seeing the self within, and that is self-realization. Just by doing this karma yoga, using the results, offering it to Krishna, we make tremendous progress, especially grihasthas. We discussed this earlier, but I'm saying again, grihasthas, we have to offer dana, we have to offer our Lakshmi in Krishna service, and we make progress. Otherwise, we get badly stuck. Asakta buddhi sarvatra jitatma vigata spruha naishkarmya siddhim paramam sannyasenadi gacchati. One who is self-controlled and unattached and who disregards all material enjoyments can obtain, by practice of renunciation, the highest perfectional stage of freedom from reaction. So this is the key for those who are not directly engaged in bhakti. So tyaga, because Arjuna asked about tyaga and sannyasa. So Krishna is saying one has to be self-controlled, unattached, disregard all material enjoyments, practice renunciation, then he can achieve the highest freedom from reaction, karma bandhana, free from karma bandhana. Is by sannyasa, tyaga and sannyasa. Real renunciation means that one should always think himself part. Prabhupada is saying all this is okay, but real renunciation is to think of ourselves as part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, there is no right to enjoy the results. So that is how we become unattached, because it all belongs to Krishna. Since he's part and parcel, the results of his work must be enjoyed by the Supreme Lord. So no question of material enjoyment. This is actually Krishna consciousness. Person acting in Krishna consciousness is really a sannyasi. So by practice of renunciation means practice Krishna consciousness. By such a mentality, one is satisfied because he is actually acting for the Supreme. Thus, he is not attached to anything material. He becomes accustomed to not taking pleasure in anything beyond the transcendental happiness derived. So beautiful, see. He becomes accustomed to not taking pleasure in anything beyond the transcendental happiness derived from the service of the Lord. Sannyasi is supposed to be free from the reactions of his past activities. But a person who is in Krishna consciousness automatically attains this perfection without even accepting the so-called order of renunciation. This state of mind is called yoga arudha. So we discussed this in the 6th chapter. Yoga arudasya tasyaiva chamakkaranam uchyate. So yoga rurukshu is starting stage, yoga arudha is perfect stage. For a yoga arudha person, there is no work. One who is satisfied in himself has no fear of any kind of reaction from his activity. Satisfied in himself. How is he satisfied himself? By doing Krishna conscious activities. he has no fear of any kind of reaction from his activity. Because when we are engaged in Krishna consciousness, we might engage in activities which might externally look like not okay. For example, building a temple, we might have to get some permissions quickly. We might end up giving some bribes, this, that, and all that. All that happens now, but there is no reaction to that activity. So Krishna consciousness is the key. Otherwise, it's very difficult in Kali Yuga, especially to make sure that we engage only in sattvic activities or only in activities of our varna. Very difficult. So Krishna consciousness is the key. Otherwise, being self-controlled, unattached, disregarding all material enjoyments, practice of renunciation, one attains the highest stage. But how difficult is it? Without having a higher taste, just imagine doing this. Unattached, self-controlled, disregarding all material enjoyment, will go crazy. That is why this Gnana Marg is like Bhunam Janmanam Anta. It takes long time for people to come to that. So for us, this unattached, disregarding material enjoyment, all this happens simply by engaging in Krishna service. And when we are engaged in Krishna service, we can engage in any kind of activity for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna and not be worried about the reactions. This is very important. Okay, so I think we'll stop here. Learn from me now how one has achieved this. Okay, so this Siddhim Prapto Yatha Brahma Tathapnoti Nibodhame Samasena Eva Kaunteya Nishta Gnanasya Yapara. Learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection. Which perfection? This perfection. Freedom from reaction. Karma, free from karma bandhana. How such a person can attain the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman. Because this free from karma bandhana is just very initial stage. This is Nishkama Karma Yoga or Nishkama Karma. Very initial stage, right? For even self-realization. So now Krishna is saying, how such a person now can attain Brahman. Now he will tell the way in which one has to act so that he can achieve Brahman. So from karma yoga to Brahman realization. So Lord describes for Arjuna how one can achieve the highest perfection stage simply by being engaged in his occupational duty, performing the duty for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One attains the supreme stage of Brahman simply by renouncing the result of his work for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. That is the process of self-realization. So Prabhupada anyway in his purport already would have given the conclusion. So we get confused sometimes saying that, oh, already it looked like we studied this, saying that we should use our occupational duties for the pleasure of the Lord. But that's what Krishna is going to say now. Going forward, he will answer. But Prabhupada already normally does this. Future verses, all the climax he brings is the previous verses only. So, we already know what Krishna is going to say. So this is the last part of Bhagavad Gita, where we will understand how one can achieve self-realization. But for that, the platform is that one should be offering, not be attached to work, offer the results of work, or be unattached, and not be attached to material enjoyment, and do the work as per his varna without attachment. So then what does he need to do to achieve the position of self-realization? That is what we will discuss. So some of these actually, from our practical application perspective, we don't really need all this because we are engaged in bhakti, so we don't have to really worry about this. But in the normal course of speaking Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is enumerating all this. Okay. So any questions? Otherwise, we'll close. Anybody has any questions? So I guess next week we will finish Bhagavad Gita, Krishna willing. And then after that we will fully start Srimad Bhagavatam. So when you come to the last class, then we will discuss how we want to go about Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam won't be like this. So what format we should do, we will discuss at that point of. Okay. Anybody? Has anything to say?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
Then
Krishna.
Hare
I
Krishna.
just have one question. Prabhuji, supposing we read in the previous verse that I forgot the line that a person who is not attached to do anything material but is the custom find happiness
Sorry,
in Lord.
taking Mataji, I can't follow properly.
Can you hear me properly? Hare
You
Krishna.
said in
Am I
the
audible?
yeah, barely a little bit.
Verse,
It's
am I
voice is
audible?
voice is not very clear. You're audible.
Krishna, now am I audible?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, in the previous verse, in the purport, there was some line that a person who is not attached to material sense gratification and is accustomed to finding pleasure in Lord's service. This was the line. I don't remember it exactly. So
Okay,
I just want.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the previous, I just wanted to know that this could be used as a yardstick for measuring how we are advancing in devotion. I mean, although a person is not able to follow all the rules and regulations strictly, but still he is not attached to doing material things and he finds satisfaction in satisfying the Lord. So this is my query.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, see, the yardstick is pleasure of Krishna, right? Now, actually, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, he's in one of his upcoming books. So he's says that not following standards doesn't mean that a person is not a devotee. Following standards, if everything is done, then it's good. But more than just following standards, the important part is whether we are doing things to please Krishna. Obviously, at one point of time, we will come to a stage where we want to follow all the rules. But if we are not able to do that, that doesn't mean that we are not doing bhakti or we don't have any love for Krishna. So the important thing is that higher taste. Vinivartante niraharasya dehinah rasavajam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. As long as we are experiencing a higher taste in Krishna's service, and it's not sense enjoyment, meaning, okay, let me just clarify this. Initially, when we engage in services, so say, for example, somebody sings well and somebody is given kirtan service. And now he or she is doing this service, but with an intention or with a mood that I do this because I like to sing. So this is not really service. This is not service mood. This is sense enjoyment mood, in the sense that we are still trying to dovetail our propensities, meaning I am good in singing, so I'm trying to use it in Krishna's service, but it's not really pure devotional service. Now, but that is not ideal, but still that process itself will bring that person to pure devotional service, meaning gradually he or she will start singing for the pleasure of the Lord. Right? So if we are already doing things for the pleasure of the Lord, the not following rules and regulations is not important. The important thing is that we should be doing it for the pleasure of the Lord. When we are doing it for the pleasure of the Lord, the details will be forgiven by Krishna. Krishna is bhavagrahi. So he will not worry too much about the rules. But when we are following this, eventually we will make sure that we follow all the rules and regulations. If you are purely doing it, we will come to the stage of following all the rules and regulations. But yes, to answer your question, does it help you? Does it provide you a yardstick to understand whether one is making progress? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Okay. Anybody has any questions? Other questions? Otherwise, we can end. Okay. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंतकोटि वैष्णववृंद की समवेत गौरभक्तवृंद की हरे कृष्ण।